Welcome into this segment of Behind the Pen presented by MostValuablePodcast.com. If you want to listen to the full podcast, go to blogtalkradio.com/MostValuablePodcast. Also, we're on iTunes, so check us out there as well. Thank you all for listening as always, and enjoy the show. So I will preview the American League side of things next. So if you're on YouTube, go check out that segment. If you're on blogtalkradio.com/MostValuablePodcast, stay tuned because I'm going to talk about it right now. So let's get into some American League contender conversation. And I'm pumped to talk about this because I think the American League is going to be extremely competitive this season. You look at the two discrepancies in the league of the American and National. I think there are a clear number of bottom feeders there in the National League, and I think this may have been true for the last 3 seasons, going on 3 seasons now, because there are obviously teams in the bottom of the division that are going to lose a certain amount of games. And I mean, obviously that benefited the Cubs, for example, last year, being able to play Cincinnati and beat up on the Brewers all the time. So in the American League, you don't have really any of those teams besides maybe in the AL Central. They're heavy there. The A's and the Angels kind of suck. But I mean, other than that, pretty much every single team in the American League was at least competitive, or at least, hovers around 75 wins or whatnot. So let's look at the potential playoff contenders here in the American League specifically. And here is my ranking. Now, if you want to check out the National League side of things, you're listening on YouTube, go check that segment out. I did it similarly to how I'm going to do it here. I'll rank the best to last in terms of contenders, in my opinion. So let's start with the Cleveland Indians. I believe this is the team who's going to win the World Series this year. I'm going to say it right now, that's my World Series team right there. Cleveland Indians, I'll get into that in a second. Under that, Boston, huge signing with Chris Sale, but they're dealing something here seriously with David Price. Now, that's a problem. I'll talk about the Red Sox as well, but Houston, Texas, the Rangers are going to be there again, but I feel like Houston did enough to overtake them, but they have to prove it on the field. I'm going to just strictly looking at it on paper. I think the Astros are legit this year. Last year was kind of a setback, but this year, I think this is it. Blue Jays, Mariners, I think the Mariners are going to be scary competitive on the heels of both Houston and Texas. And then I have the Orioles and Tigers as kind of rounding out the bottom end there of the contenders, in air quotes, there in the American League. I left out the Royals. I don't know about them. I really don't. They have to get healthy. Moustakas is back. I understand that. Hosmer's still a top talent. Alcides Escobar is one of the least valuable offensive shortstops in the game, but yet he's playing every day because of his defense. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Lorenzo Cain, awesome talent, but I think it's a transition, or at least the beginning of the transition period for the Royals as their payroll's starting to decrease again. They're going to have to maybe deal Hosmer because I don't know if they're going to afford him. I think Lorenzo Cain is coming up too. So they're dealing with things there in Kansas City, so I don't have them as legitimate contenders. They could surprise us. We shall see. I did talk about the Royals in a previous segment here on Behind the Pen. If you want to hear my thoughts on them, go check that out on a segment here on YouTube. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, thank you so much for sticking around. But let's start with the conversation. So one more time, Cleveland, Boston, Houston, Texans. Houston Texans. Look at that. Football is on the mind. Houston, the Texas Rangers after that, Blue Jays, Mariners, Orioles, Tigers. So that's the order in terms of talented teams in the American League vying for the World Series championship. I said the Cleveland Indians number 1 because last year, I think they would have taken down the Cubs if they were healthy. I will say that. I think if Danny Salazar, Carlos Carrasco, Michael Brantley as well, I think if they were in the lineup and in the rotation, the Cubs probably would have been swept because that team was unreal, especially with their rotation, even throwing out Josh Tomlin. Trevor Bauer was pretty good, right? Even Cody Anderson for a time there, right? I mean, Mike Clevenger, too, did a pretty solid job in the postseason for Cleveland. So you have to take that into account. Now, they're getting what it seems to be a healthy Carlos Carrasco and Danny Salazar back. You add that on to AL Cy Young candidate Corey Kluber. So are you serious? Trevor Bauer also rounding it out, Josh Tomlin. That is such a good starting 5. Probably the best in baseball, I would argue, to say. Possibly. Arguably. I'm sticking with Cleveland there. As long as they're healthy, they look very good. And then you look at that bullpen. They still have talent in the bullpen. How much are they going to rely on Cody Allen? We will see. Andrew Miller is a unique arm that can come in at any point of the game and pitch 2 1/3. Whatever he needs to do, he can do it. Of course, they're getting Zach McAllister back, who was big, and Shaw as well. So, the bullpen's solid. And then that was one of the reasons why the Indians were so good last year as well. But I think on top of that, you're getting healthy and you lost Mike Napoli, and it says, okay, well, we got to fill that role somehow. You have Edwin Encarnacion signing in Cleveland this year. That is a major, major boost to that line. I think that's the icing on the cake, if you ask me. If you talk about what the Cleveland Indians needed to propel themselves forward, one, a healthy rotation, have it. They can maintain that. They're a lock in the World Series, in my opinion. You add in Encarnacion's bat. That is so valuable. Going from right to left on the infield, Encarnacion, Kipnis, Francisco Lindor, who will be, spoiler alert, my AL MVP this season, and Jose Ramirez. This is just insane. And Jose Ramirez signed an extension. What the Cleveland Indians have going for them right now in terms of young players, the talent all across the board. Tyler Naquin there in center field. Abraham Almonte, who was out for 80 games last year. Young speedster center fielder. Solid. Brandon Geyer's coming back. Mashes left-handed pitching. Had a big role in the postseason last year. Michael Brantley appears to be healthy. Appears to be. You know, you don't expect him to play maybe 140 games this season, but it's a huge boost to have him back in the lineup. Maybe, you know, giving you 80 games, 90 games, 100 games. Michael Brantley in the lineup is much better than Michael Brantley not in the lineup, obviously. Lonnie Chisenhall, Abraham Almonte, like I said. I like it. I like Cleveland a lot. They are my pick to win the World Series. They will beat the Cubs in the World Series this season. That's it. Now let's move on to Boston. And that's just me. When I say that's it, that's just me saying, okay, that's my thinking. We're looking at the Boston Red Sox now, and they went out and acquired Chris Sale, right? And what a job there by Dave Dombrowski in Boston, because you talk about a guy who goes out and gets things. This is a baseball city, and it really, I have to give the Red Sox so much credit because they'll finish in the bottom of the AL East one season, and the next, they're competing for a World Series spot. They're just incredible in every facet of the imagination. I love that city. I love the passion of the crowd, of just the baseball feel of the Boston area. So I think they are among the best teams in baseball, probably top 4 in baseball at this point, but they're dealing with something in David Price, and that has to be taken into account because he said he's going to pitch through it. He said something like, well, if I was maybe 4 years younger, I would have surgery. Well, that's not good. So you know that David Price is pitching with some sort of discomfort this season. April's pretty much washed, so he's not going to come back until what, May maybe? It could be even longer depending on the rehab process or how he's, throwing it in practice bullpen sessions and all that jazz. So keep an eye on David Price, but that rotation is still pretty darn good, especially with the addition of Chris Sale in this rotation. Rick Porcello, reigning Cy Young Award winner, could have given it to Justin Verlander. Yeah, it could, up for debate. But you look at that, Porcello, Sale, Eduardo Rodriguez, a young lefty arm, as well as Stephen Wright, the knuckleballer. So you have at least production to get you through the regular season, and hopefully David Price can come back healthy. But, he hasn't really been that great in the postseason throughout his career. So that's just something. Chris Sale, though, huge boost, going to give you, a ton of innings. He's going to strike out guys. He doesn't throw as hard as he did early in his career just to preserve his body. He's like 115 pounds soaking wet. Obviously, I'm exaggerating there, but he's just literally, if you Boston fans haven't seen him in person yet, he is a twig on the mound, but he is electric. Devastating slider, can locate his fastball, really good at mixing his pitches, especially his off speed. So awesome job by Dombrowski doing what he had to do, giving up the number 1 prospect in baseball in Yoan Moncada to acquire him. And I talk about the prospects, and that's why the Boston Red Sox are going to be good, not only for this season, but for years to come. Benintendi, I'm close to saying that he could win the AL Rookie of the Year because he maintained his rookie status, if I'm not mistaken. He's a game changer. I think last season in the playoffs, he was one of the most disruptive guys in the Red Sox lineup that the Cleveland Indians had to prepare for because you really don't know how to attack him, especially early in his career. He was producing all over the place. He wasn't getting beat on the pitching side. He was able to go the other way as well. So I think, oh man, they got something really good in Benintendi. You move over to Jackie Bradley Jr. That guy had an emergent season, one of the most productive outfielders in the game. Mookie Betts reminds me of a young Andrew McCutchen. Are you kidding me? And then from left to right in the infield, really the only hole is at third base. Sandoval looks in shape, but we'll have to see. He hasn't really produced much in 2 years with the Red Sox. Brock Holt, he can do the job there if need be, but Xander Bogaerts, another young young player. I talk about this right at the beginning of this podcast. The young players are taking over And the Red Sox have so many of them. Benintendi, Bradley Jr., Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts. You move over Dustin Pedroia, obviously still. They had to replace Big Papi in some way. I think they were linked to Encarnacion, ended up going to Cleveland. Mitch Moreland's there. Hanley Ramirez is there. So that'll do the job, right? That'll do the job. Craig Kimbrell, you have a guy that you can at least rely on or you feel comfortable with to hand the ball to there in the ninth inning. So Red Sox going to be there. Keep an eye on David Price. Going to be a game changer. Rattled off a little bit on the two best teams in the American League, in my opinion. But, I'm going to keep it short and sweet from here on out, I promise. But those are the two most intriguing teams there in the American League. Probably going to make the most noise there in that league. So moving on, Houston. I have them third because of what they were able to do this offseason. I did a show, by the way, on the Astros. You want to check that segment out. I'll get more in depth in them specifically. But I like this team. I think this is a time for them to emerge as legit. I mean, they had a lot of hype going into last season, kind of underwhelmed. This season, they're legit. All I'm going to say, I think they have quality all across the board. Their starting five, I think, is very solid. So let's continue this conversation. Like I said, I apologize. Go back to my previous segment on the Houston Astros. I think I talked about it with Ricky Widmer as well. He was on, so check that out. As well as on the Rangers, I touched on the Rangers as well on that show. We look at the Texas Rangers. I have them below the Houston Astros, mainly because I believe the Astros have a leg up there in terms of value across the board. I think maybe in the rotation, maybe Texas has an upper hand here because, Dallas Keuchel coming off, he was Cy Young caliber prior to 2015. So if he can return to form, then I would probably give the edge to Houston. But I like Texas's starting rotation, especially starting with Cole Hamels and Yu Darvish. That is legit. Martin Perez is actually very good as well. So you have quality there. Then you look at the position players literally in the field there for Texas. Solid across the board. Beltre can still pop. He's got bang in his bat still. Elvis Andrews is a very talented player. Rougned Odor can throw a mad punch, I'll tell you that. Mike Napoli, Party of Napoli's going to Texas. So I like it. They're young as well. They have a nice mix of young players there in the outfield. So Texas is going to be in the mix for sure. Fourth in the American League, in my opinion, at this point. Toronto, Seattle, Baltimore, and Detroit. Now, I had to include Baltimore because they surprised me last year. Suddenly, for whatever reason, they were in the American League wildcard game. I don't know how, but they were consistent all season, mainly because they kept hitting home runs for the most part. So I'm not going to discount the Orioles, but I think this year they take a step backward, while Toronto is still in the mix there in the AL East, but they're not going to catch Boston. They're going to have to compete for a wild card, which is going to stink. Obviously, they were able to retain Jose Bautista because it's interesting. This offseason, we've seen teams not commit to big-time power bats, right? Especially Bautista. He was asking for way too much. He's too old. Same with Encarnacion. They've been on the market for so long. Mark Trumbo as well. So it's just interesting. Just a side note there. But I think Toronto, absolutely competitive for sure. Josh Donaldson, one of the best players in the game. Troy Tulowitzki, right? Devin Travis hopefully will be healthy. If not, my boy Darwin Barney will take care of things over there at second base. So I like it. Their rotation, though, that's what's going to carry them. Marco Estrada, Jay Happ, Marcus Stroman, Liriano, and Aaron Sanchez. Guys, Aaron Sanchez, unreal. This guy is so electric. I love watching him pitch. He's got such sharp movement on all of his stuff. So, I love it. I love the Toronto Blue Jays rotation, and I think they're dangerous in the lineup still, even missing Encarnacion. You're going to have Justin Smoke there replacing him. Kendrys Morales as well. So, we'll see. I think Toronto's competitive, though. Seattle, interesting team. I have them 6. However, they could surprise a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. I think they have a nice mix of speed and power. Right, they were able to acquire Jared Dyson. I don't know if he's a quality everyday starter there in the outfield, but it looks like that they're going to commit to him. Leonis Martin's a nice piece, and Haniger. Haniger is a guy who's going to take over there as a young player, is going to emerge as Seattle. So there's youth there, and we've seen it in the past with prior teams that youth can perform at this level consistently. So that's what the Mariners are banking on there in the outfield specifically. But you move on. Kyle Seager is one of the most underrated superstars in the game today. I feel like he's overshadowed by many other players, even by his brother, right? But, I mean, you look at the Mariners infield from left to right. This is quality, guys. Very, very much quality with Seager, Segura, and Cano from left to right. And then, at first base, they'll figure it out. And you look at this rotation, it'll do the job. Felix Hernandez may have had a scare there in the World Baseball Classic, but hopefully he's healthy enough to do the job there in the playoffs, or not playoffs, I'm thinking playoffs already. It's March 30th, guys, opening day's this Sunday. I'm so excited. So, I mean, that was just a quick run through. I mean, you look through at the Mariners depth chart. Like I said, I've covered a lot of these teams, by the way, in prior Behind the Pen episodes, so check those out if you could. I'll get more in depth. Nelson Cruz still legit. So Mariners going to give Houston and Texas a run there, as well as in the wild card race as well. So this is going to be fun. I think the AL West is going to be the most competitive division in the American League. I think if you're going to have any lock anywhere, it'll be Cleveland and Boston. So 2 locks, Cleveland and Boston, competitive American League West. And then you have Baltimore, Detroit, Blue Jays. Maybe I'll give a shout out to the Royals. But I mean, there's going to be a mad run at the wild card this year. Maybe even the Yankees. As crazy as that sounds. Maybe they find some consistency in their cluster of young players that maybe will emerge at this season. So thank you guys for sticking around for this segment of Behind the Pen. If you want more most valuable podcast content, click on the video up above, because I don't know why you wouldn't want to keep listening to our voices every day. But again, guys, thank you all for listening. We really do appreciate you.